Good morning. Today is Thursday, April 17th, almost Friday. This is Wake Up with KERA News, and I'm Andrew Garcia. Lovely spring weather has graced us today. You can expect some wind and climbing temperatures. We'll have highs in the upper 80s. Tarrant County has kicked off a controversial redistricting process. We'll hear why it's so controversial even before it's already started. That's after today's news. Some Dallas City Council members were shocked after Interim Police Chief Michael Igo announced his resignation yesterday. Igo served in the role since last year. Since then, he's tried to navigate the city through a voter mandate last year, requiring the city to hire hundreds more police officers. Igo hasn't said what his plans are after leaving the department. Some UT Dallas faculty members want their school to help international students who've recently had their visas terminated. UTD said last week that 19 students have been impacted so far. In a letter, the UTD chapter of the American Association of University Professors urged the school to provide legal support for the students and keep them enrolled. Meanwhile, UTD has created a page on its website with resources for students who lost their immigration status. Tarrant County has started a redistricting process that was already controversial before it even started. Republican county commissioners outvoted Democrats 3-2 to hire a law firm to rethink how commissioners' precincts are drawn. Republicans say the current map is unbalanced and needs to be reworked, but Democrats on the board think there's an ulterior motive. KERA's Miranda Suarez joined me for a breakdown of Tarrant County's efforts to redraw its boundaries. So, Miranda, redistricting usually happens after the census every 10 years. The last one was back in 2020. So why do Republicans in Tarrant County want this now?
Yeah, I think that's what local Democrats would like to know. I talked to Republican County Commissioner Manny Ramirez, and he says he's concerned about population balance between precincts.
I mean, you can just intuitively look at it and say there's zero way that we're balanced.
But 2020 census data shows the precincts were in balance during the last redistricting cycle. Experts decide kind of what the ideal precinct size is, and they say that the overall deviation between precincts should not be more than 10%. 2020 census data for Tarrant County shows the deviation was 2%. And a previous commissioner's court saw that number, and they decided that was small enough to keep the map exactly the same. They didn't redistrict at all after the 2020 census. Ramirez acknowledged he doesn't have current numbers to show the precincts are totally out of whack with that 10% rule. He does say even a small deviation of 2% is too much, and precincts should be as close to exactly even as possible.
So is mid-decade redistricting even allowed?
Yeah, that is another question Democrats wanted answered. Commissioner Simmons said at a recent meeting, no, the county does not have the authority to do this. But experts I spoke to say mid-decade redistricting is allowed. One of the people I talked to was Bob Heath. He's an attorney. He's worked on Tarrant County maps for several redistricting cycles, and in fact has worked in redistricting so long that he remembers when he had to do it with big paper maps.
A mid-decade redistricting, I would say, is unusual but not unprecedented.
And Heath and everybody I spoke to for this story agreed redistricting is always a deeply political process. Whichever party is in power will try to use it to strengthen their own positions.
So I've got a picture of the current map pulled up here, and I gotta admit, it's pretty hard to parse. Some precincts are like cutting into others, carving out little pockets. So it makes me wonder, what does a fair map even look like?
It is so complicated. You know, if you look at a map, Tarrant County is like a perfect little square, but you can't just chop that up into 4 perfect squares and call it a day. University of Houston political science professor Brendan Rottinghouse put it like this.
Simplicity is always valued in map making, but the problem is that sometimes you can't be as simple as you'd like.
As we talked about before, population has to be balanced between precincts. Map makers don't want to break up neighborhoods. If a neighborhood has been in a particular district for a long time, you probably want to keep it there. And they also have to consider historic voting blocks and racial and ethnic groups. The Voting Rights Act bans discrimination in this area. And according to Heath, what discrimination might look like is like breaking up a racial and ethnic group across districts to dilute their power so they can't elect the person they want in one district. That's one example of discrimination. And that's the kind of thing Tarrant County Democrats are worried about. Democrats on the court represent majority-minority districts. And Commissioner Simmons says redistricting is an attempt to weaken Black and Hispanic voting power.
So the big question is, what happens next in this process? What should people expect?
Yeah, there is no timeline for this first phase of redistricting that we know of. Commissioner Manny Ramirez is stressing we are at the very beginning of this. Nothing is set in stone. And meanwhile, Democrats are saying, buckle up to get sued over this. The political science professor I talked to, Brandon Rottinghouse, said, yeah, this will end up in court because redistricting almost always does.
That was my conversation with KERA's Miranda Suarez. Despite a year riddled with injuries and tearful goodbyes, the Mavericks season isn't over yet, as Dallas crushed the Sacramento Kings 120-106 last night in the play-in tournament. Led by Anthony Davis and Klay Thompson, both scoring upwards of 20 points each, the Mavs were in control early in the game and never took their foot off the gas. They'll now take on the Grizzlies in Memphis on Friday night for a chance to secure the final playoff spot in the West. And speaking of the playoffs, the Dallas Stars begin their first-round series against the Avalanche on Saturday. They ended their regular season on a loss to Nashville last night, but it wasn't all bad news, as it saw the return of their veteran center, Tyler Seguin, who hasn't played since December after undergoing hip surgery. He notched 1 assist in his return, helping him tune up just in time for the postseason. And get ready to dance in your seats at Fair Park Music Hall. The classic musical Mamma Mia is on stage now through April 27th. To get tickets and find other things to do, visit kera.org/calendar. Thanks so much for listening to Wake Up with KERA News. I'm your host, Andrew Garcia. The show is produced and edited by Shardae White and Bekah Morr. For more news in your inbox, visit kera.org/wakeup. That's where you can subscribe to the Wake Up with KERA News newsletter. Connect with us on Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok at KERATX. We'll see you tomorrow on Friday.